Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanova and you're watching AnewZ, and let's see the headlines. South Korean authorities attempt to detain impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says President-elect Donald Trump could be decisive in stopping war in Ukraine. China will sharply increase funding from treasury bonds to spur growth in 2025. South Korean authorities attempted to arrest impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol today, but failed after facing resistance from both his supporters and presidential security forces. The arrest warrant was subsequently suspended. Yoon is under investigation for insurrection over his controversial martial law declaration in December.
Authorities from the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials of South Korea attempted to execute an unprecedented arrest warrant for impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. However, the operation quickly encountered obstacles. A large crowd of Yoon supporters gathered outside his residence, vowing to prevent the arrest. Once inside the compound, investigators faced a standoff with the Presidential Security Service and military troops tasked with guarding the president.
I'm here in front of the official residence to save our country from the crisis. Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials is trying to arrest the president in an illegal way, not in a legitimate way. So I came here today to prevent it.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has followed the country's laws so far. However, they don't follow the laws. The Republic of Korea is becoming a lawless world. As a South Korean citizen, I couldn't just overlook this situation, so I decided to come here.
Yoon's legal team has argued that the arrest warrant is unlawful and that they will take legal action. The warrant remains valid until January 6th, and investigators must decide whether to pursue further action after Yoon's arrest. Yoon is under investigation for insurrection after declaring martial law on December 3rd, a controversial move that caused shockwaves across the nation. The investigation stems from his failure to comply with multiple summons to answer questions about the declaration, which critics argue could be seen as an illegal attempt to suppress political opposition. The arrest warrant was issued after Yoon failed to appear before investigators.
Turkey has reaffirmed its commitment to protecting all groups in Syria, regardless of their ethnicity or religion. In a recent statement, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan emphasized Turkey's role as a guardian for minorities and displaced Syrians, highlighting the country's ongoing efforts to offer refuge and support in the face of oppression.
Turkey is determined to protect all aggrieved groups in Syria, the country's foreign minister Hakan Fidan stated, with his Belgian counterpart Bernard Quinton in Ankara. He explained that during the oppression under the Assad government, millions of Sunni Arabs, as well as ethnic Turks, were displaced and forced to seek refuge in other countries.
Diğer taraftan Suriye'de kamplar dışında da bulunan yabancı
On the other hand, we want the foreign terrorist fighters who are also outside the camps in Syria, especially those in the ranks of the PKK who oppose the unity and integrity of the country, and not only oppose the unity and integrity of Syria, but also threaten the unity and integrity of Turkey and its surrounding countries, to leave the country as soon as possible.
ülkeyi terk etmelerini istiyoruz.
Bernard Quinton expressed his desire for Turkey's assistance in communicating with the Syrian government.
And given Turkey's influence and contacts with actors on the ground, we discussed how we could join efforts to this end. I mean, you know them better than us. You are their neighbor. They will remain your neighbor. As we say, you can change of friends, but you can never change of neighbors. So they are there. So really count on you, my dear friend, to help us help them, and to also convey our message, but also to convey their message to us, how we can help them. We spoke about the financial system, the banking system. Let's see how we can help also to lift some sanctions. I mean, it's a process in order for them to be able to deliver for the people.
Turkish Foreign Minister added that Turkey did not hesitate to offer sanctuary to those seeking protection from oppression. Since 2011, the country has provided refuge to over 3 million Syrians.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has reported that more than 115,000 Syrian refugees have returned to their home country following the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime. In a written statement, the UNHCR provided details on the developments, noting that since December 8, 2024, individuals have been repatriating from neighboring countries, including Turkey, Jordan and Lebanon. The figures concerning these returns are based on public disclosures by host nations, interactions with migration services in Syria, and border observations conducted by UNHCR and its partners. UNHCR said the Turkish Minister of Interior reported that more than 35,000 Syrians have voluntarily returned home. For its part, Jordan noted that more than 22,000 people have entered Syria through its territory, 3,100 of whom were registered refugees. Meanwhile, the number of Syrians departing Lebanon through official border crossings remains low but steady. These journeys are predominantly through the Masna crossing and include people who may be making short trips to assess the situation in Syria. Turkey's Defense Minister Yaşar Güler visited an unmanned aircraft systems base command in the eastern city of Batman to outline the strategic goals of the Turkish armed forces for the new year. Defense Minister Yaşar Güler, joined by senior military officials, praised the base's contributions to Turkey's defense operations, particularly in cross-border missions in northern Iraq and northern Syria. Güler highlighted the Turkish Air Force's pivotal role in national security, describing it as a source of pride with its advanced technology, skilled personnel and operational successes. He also noted that Turkey's UAV and UCAV programs have garnered international recognition, bolstering both the defense sector and the country's export potential. Güler reaffirmed Turkey's resolve in combating terrorism, stating that the nation will persist until full border security is achieved. He also addressed the importance of a self-reliant and modern defense industry, stressing that the Turkish armed forces' dominance in the skies remains a top priority. Russia launched a massive drone attack on Ukraine, killing one civilian and injuring others in the Kiev region. Ukrainian forces shot down most of the drones, but damage was still extensive across several regions.
In a large-scale overnight attack, Russia launched 93 drones to Ukraine, with Ukrainian air defenses successfully intercepting 60 of them. The barrage targeted 9 Ukrainian regions, including Kiev, Donetsk and Chernihiv, causing widespread damage. Authorities report that in Kiev, 1 civilian was killed by drone debris and 4 others, including a 16-year-old, were injured. The Ukrainian military said the drones were part of an ongoing strategy by Russia to disrupt Ukraine's infrastructure. Several private homes, commercial buildings, and even a high-rise apartment were damaged. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed hope that US President-elect Donald Trump's influence could help turn the tide in the war.
Trump can be decisive. For us, this is the most important thing. His qualities are indeed there. He can be decisive in this war. He's capable of stopping Putin. Or to put it more fairly, help us stop Putin. He is able to do this. Of course, I would like for President Trump's proposed plan to be aligned with our view. It cannot be otherwise. We are Ukraine, and it's our independence, our land, our future.
He emphasized the need for robust security guarantees from international allies and said that stabilizing the front lines is crucial for Ukraine's future. On the battlefield, situation remains tense as the fighting between Ukraine and Russia continues. A recent attack in Kursk targeted a Russian command post, leading to significant damage. Meanwhile, Russian casualties continue to mount. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russian forces suffered 102 casualties for every square kilometer of Ukrainian land seized. In 2024 alone, Russia gained 4,168 square kilometers at the cost of over 420,000 casualties, highlighting the heavy human cost of Russia's military objectives.
Ivory Coast has announced that French troops will withdraw from the West African nation, further reducing the military influence of the former colonial power in the continent. The move comes as anti-French sentiment continues to rise in the region, dealing a blow to regional ambitions of France.
Ivorians expressed their reactions to President Alassane Ouattara's decision to end the French military presence in Ivory Coast. Many welcomed the move, which redefines the West African nation's ties with its former colonial ruler.
I praise the leadership of the Ivorian president because Ivory Coast is a responsible country. The agreements have been signed since 1960 with the late President Félix Houphouët-Boigny. We are in 2025, that is to say more than 50 years later, and the talks that the president has had with France, I think it's really diplomacy.
It's true that it's taken a long time, but today if we've reached this point, it's because it's the right time. There's no debate about it. Today, if we're at the end of our contract, it's good for everyone.
Ouattara announced on Tuesday that French troops would depart, marking another step in France's broader military withdrawal from the region. France has been scaling back its forces in West and Central Africa, reducing its presence from around 2,200 to approximately 600 troops. Separately, Senegal confirmed the withdrawal of French troops from the country would be completed by the end of 2025. Ivory Coast is home to the biggest remaining contingent of French troops in West Africa, with some 600 French military personnel. France has already pulled its soldiers out of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, while the government of Chad abruptly ended its defense pact with France in November 2024.
France's military presence in Africa is coming to an end, as many nations on the continent strive to consolidate their independence. Countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger and Chad have openly called on the French government to withdraw its troops. These developments have compelled France to reassess its influence in the region.
Since 2022, there has been a marked reduction in France's military presence in Africa. This process began with the termination of military cooperation in Mali, followed by the closure of French bases in Burkina Faso and Niger. More recently, Chad and Ivory Coast have taken steps to ensure the full withdrawal of French troops. Chad's president, Mahamat Idriss Déby Itno, announced that French forces would leave the country by 31st January 2025. Similarly, the leaders of Senegal and Ivory Coast have expressed their determination to end the presence of foreign troops within their borders. Paris-based journalist and strategy expert Leslie Varenne has described France's withdrawal from Africa as a defeat. She argues that the Barkhane operation in the Sahel region failed to meet its objectives and that France was unable to ensure security in the area. Varenne also highlights that political coups in several African countries have hastened this process.
I believe Emmanuel Macron is a president who manages international relations in much the same way as he governs the country, that is, in a rather authoritarian manner. He makes decisions on his own, does not measure the difficulty of complex situations, does not consult those who understand the issues well, and take authoritarian steps, even with his African counterparts. This approach has had significant consequences. We saw it again with Chad's unexpected decision to cancel its cooperation agreement with France. Authoritarianism is no longer works anywhere in the world, particularly in Africa and the Middle East. French diplomacy has always regarded itself as representing an indispensable country, but this perspective has shifted in recent years.
France now plans to maintain its military presence exclusively in Djibouti, where 1,500 troops are stationed. This base holds strategic importance in East Africa. President Emmanuel Macron has announced that the Djibouti base will serve as a projection point for France's overseas operations. Across Africa, leaders are making increasingly autonomous decisions, reshaping their priorities for regional security and development. The withdrawal of French forces has enabled many nations to craft their own national strategies. As African nations strengthen partnerships with new allies, French influence in the region continues to decline. A prominent opposition figure in France, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, has urged the government to move beyond its colonial past and establish a new model for relations with Africa. This approach seeks to build partnerships based on mutual respect, embodying a forward-looking vision for France's engagement with the continent.
Ivory Coast has announced that French troops will begin withdrawing from the country in January 2025, concluding a military presence that has lasted for decades. President Alassane Ouattara stated that this decision reflects the modernization and strengthening of the Ivorian army, which now assumes greater responsibility for the nation's security. Today we are honored to speak with François Constantini, geopolitologist who is joining us now from Corsica. Mr. Constantini, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mr. Constantini, the recent decision by the Ivorian government to request the departure of French troops has sparked widespread discussion. In your opinion, what are the major reasons behind Ivory Coast's decision to ask French troops to leave?
I think the situation in Ivory Coast is the same like in Burkina Faso and mostly in Senegal. In Ivory Coast, the withdrawal of French troops is coming from an agreement, because we know that President Alassane Ouattara has been so much supported by former French president, mostly Nicolas Sarkozy, who sent troops to fire President Laurent Gbagbo, who was, despite the legal president, elected. So Alassane Ouattara, we know, is very close to France, but I think he's also taking the same ways of general French government. I think the first time from 150 years, because after colonialism, there are also immediately after African independence in 1960, 13 agreements of defense which aims French troops to stay in this country and to have bases and to help the government. I think it's a new page in history because it's perhaps the time to end what we call France-Afrique, Africa, French, and Italy, and France in the same role, and perhaps new time for special relationship, equality with French and new countries. But in Ivory Coast also it's something very special because the French was very present, and perhaps now it's a time perhaps in France to get more economic influence than military and political influence.
Mm-hmm. So what impact could the withdrawal of French troops have on regional security in West Africa?
For me, that's the main problem, because we can't forget in France that we lost 52 soldiers in different operations in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Chad, and I think and Mauritania. And I think this is the main problem, because we know the Islamist groups in Sahel are getting more and more strong, and for the moment African troops get not so much ready to fight against Islamic terrorism. Burkina Faso, the earlier collapse of the state, like in Mali and Ivory Coast, we know there is already fragilities inside this country, and the main problem will be security, and France will not be there anymore, even to fight against terrorism. We know also that in the Ivory army, many generals unofficially talk to President Alassane Ouattara. They are not happy about this withdrawal of French troops, because there are the regular talks and collaboration and common works and workshops with the French intelligence service and the French intelligence troops. That's the main issue, the main problem could be the control about radical Islamists in the region. And I think at least French technical and help was all very useful to these countries and securities of these people also.
So as we know, public opinion often plays a significant role in shaping national policies. So how have Ivory Coast citizens reacted to this announcement?
I think there are many different opinions in Ivory Coast. You see, this country is also very divided. You have Muslim groups close to President Ouattara, but also Christian groups who are supposed to be close to France, but who hates France because France supports the resignment of President Laurent Gbagbo. And I know the French also doesn't have many helps and support inside the Ivory people. And I think mostly there is an agreement to be agreed with this withdrawal of French army, except I told you many Ivory officials who are close to French army never forget. We should never forget also that many African officers come in the École de Guerre, in the superior official school in Paris, and were very close to French army, French doctrine, and French rules of truth and principle. And perhaps this African army knows they have to find also helpers, medicines, practical strategy. It will be very hard, after 60 years, 60, 70 years, to be separate about French support, French army support.
So as you have mentioned, this is not the first instance of an African country re-evaluating its relationship with French military forces. Exploring past examples helps contextualize Ivory Coast's decision. Are there any precedents for African nations asking French troops to leave?
There is, of course. Senegal, we know Senegal, as I think end of January, new President Hassan Diop, Prime Minister, asked the French troop to withdraw to Senegal. But this was more example because it was a unilateral decision. It was not after an agreement. In Ivory Coast, it was after an agreement between French and Ivorian government. This time in Senegal, we know in Senegal there is a new leader, new party, the PASTEF, with a Pan-African anti-colonialist party. So this party is a symbol to fire a French troop for the first time. But also it's not the same situation. But it's also a withdrawal in the end, and it's also we have to say a collapse of Macron policy, mostly. And it's also the sign that France is not able also to lead in Africa as before. Perhaps it's the end of country. No, it's the time of Russia. It's the time of Turkey not in this area, but mostly in East Africa, in Somalia, Sudan, or some country. There is time of perhaps not imperialism, but influences policy. China, Russia, Turkey coming in Africa. It's a time of new country, emerging country coming in Africa, and withdrawal of European and Western country. It's also a sign of general relationships times.
So how has France responded to Ivory Coast's request?
France give an agreement. It's a request. They say they give an agreement like a general agreement. So the French, officially, the French government say it's coming from official talk between the two presidents, the two governments, and the withdrawal is accepted. That's it. No words after. But I don't think it was coming when we know President Ouattara closed opinion of France and support of France. Mostly, it didn't come, I think, from unilateral. We can never compare absolutely Senegal and Ivory Coast situation, for instance.
Also, it's very interesting, what are the potential economic implications of this move for both countries?
Economic implication has to change. You know, in France was influencing Africa economy, but France also was very interested about uranium resource, mostly because we had one of the stronger, biggest world industry of uranium, nuclear energy producing. And we saw also, for instance, Areva, the French company, will leave Niger, who is a very big producer of uranium, and this is also strategic. That's the main problem. So it's France which change its uranium, with effect uranium stake in Kazakhstan, in South Africa, in other countries. That's a question. We know perhaps they will need also this strategic withdrawal is a total strategic withdrawal, including implementing the policy, defense, and economy. And perhaps also, no, me, I think personally, it's really the time of France in Africa, really. Because France, no, can you imagine when you see Mayotte, what the storm of Mayotte happened, even the small island of Mayotte, France has difficulty to rebuild Mayotte and to set a real priority only for Mayotte. Though I don't think it's realistic also for French policy and economy. We have to be to keep in the mind that France has one of the biggest war debt of the world, 3,300 billion euros of debt, which is a main economic and political problem in France. And France now is on the withdrawal. So France is becoming really the little France, and I think it's unfortunately for France the way of history.
Mr. Constantini, thank you for taking our time for an interview with AnewZ. Thank you very much.
Bye.
That was François Constantini, geopolitologist, who joined us from Corsica. Now to economic news. China plans to strengthen its economy in 2025. The country will focus on providing durable goods for consumers and equipment for businesses.
China is implementing measures to boost its economy in 2025, including increased ultra-long treasury bond funding, interest rate cuts, and financial aid programs for durable goods and business equipment upgrades. The government aims for 5% growth for 2025, while accepting a budget deficit of 4% of GDP, despite challenges such as the property crisis and potential U.S. tariffs. China's Vice Secretary of the National Development and Reform Commission, Yuan Da, expressed optimism about the country's economic recovery for this year.
There is ample room for macro policies in this year, adding that we have more experience in macro policies. Overall, we are confident that the economy will continue to rebound and improve this year.
Millions of government workers received wage increases averaging 500 won, approximately $70 per month from July 2024, injecting an estimated $12 to $20 billion into the economy. These pay raises aim to stimulate spending, though some critics question their focus on civil servants, arguing that the move may damage private sector.
Tesla shares fell more than 7% Thursday morning after it reported its first decline in annual deliveries, sparking discussions over the future trajectory of the stock.
Tesla handed over 1.79 million electric vehicles in 2024, down 1% from 2023 and below the 1% gain predicted by analysts. Incentives failed to boost demand for its aging lineup of models. CEO Elon Musk expected promotions, including zero interest rate financing, to power a slight growth in deliveries in 2024. Reduced European subsidies, a shift in the US toward lower-priced hybrid vehicles, and tougher competition from China's BYD have pressured Tesla. In response, Musk pivoted Tesla to self-driving taxis and backed President-elect Donald Trump with millions of dollars in campaign donations, in hopes that it could bring regulatory relief for the company. Deliveries in the fourth quarter also dropped. With self-driving technology still years away, analysts have said Tesla will have to rely on cheaper versions of current cars and the Cybertruck to drive sales growth in the near term.
Turkey's first domestic electric vehicle producer, TOG, has delivered nearly 50,000 cars to date. In 2023, the company sold approximately 20,000 units of T10X model. TOG sales surged 54% in 2024 compared to the previous year and reached 30,000 units. In December, the EV company delivered more than 5,700 cars. While vehicle sales data for December and the whole of 2024 haven't been unveiled yet. Hanoi is currently facing severe air pollution, which poses significant health risks to residents, particularly vulnerable groups such as the elderly and those with pre-existing respiratory conditions. The hazardous AQI rating of 305 underscores the urgency of addressing the sources of pollution, such as heavy traffic, trash burning, and industrial activities.
Vietnam's bustling capital city of Hanoi woke up shrouded in a dense layer of smog as air pollution reached hazardous levels. A panoramic view of the city reveals its iconic skyline barely visible through the heavy haze, as the government said it would push for more electric vehicles to alleviate the problem. Streets that are typically vibrant and bustling were veiled in gray, as motorcycles and cars navigated through the murky air. Cyclists, braving the pollution, moved alongside congested traffic, their faces partially covered with masks in an attempt to filter the noxious air. This persistent smog has disrupted daily life in Hanoi, reducing visibility and leaving residents, especially the elderly and those with respiratory conditions, struggling with health issues.
There is serious air pollution in Hanoi at the moment. We, the elderly, can feel it very significantly, especially those of us who suffer from respiratory problems that lead to troubled breathing. This is a situation that seems to be getting more and more serious in recent times.
In the early morning, I thought it was fog on the way to take my exam, but I later found out that it was actually fine dust that reduces my vision and makes me feel like it's not healthy to breathe.
With the seriousness of this air pollution, the only way for me to protect myself is to wear layers and layers of clothing.
Deputy Prime Minister Tran Hong Ha called for an accelerated transition to electric vehicles as part of the efforts to reduce pollution, state media reported. So far, Hanoi has a target for at least 50% of buses and 100% of taxis to be electric vehicles by 2030.
That's all for now. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned to AnewZ.